Learning Curves and Coffee, where we skip the perfection, spill the real, and talk parenting, teaching, and personal growth over a hot cup. I'm Ivory, a mother, edupreneur, and your caffeinated co-pilot through the meltdowns, meetings, and magical moments. Let's get into it. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are listening. Can we have an honest conversation today? Because I think a lot of parents raising neurodiverse children are quietly carrying pressure they don't even realize they've internalized. And I don't just think it, I have qualitative data based on my coaching and consulting with parents. There is a pressure for their child to catch up, outperform, mask, behave appropriately, be high functional, be exceptional, prove people wrong. And underneath all of that is this unspoken fear. If my child struggles too much, will the world value them? Right? That's the question that often is not being said explicitly, but I know many parents are thinking and feeling. And that's incredibly heavy. And a lot of us as parents are parenting again from that fear more than we realize. I remember sitting at a table with other parents when the milestone conversation started. You know, the ones, my child is already reading, mine is doing multiplication. My child tested gifted. My child is doing advanced classes. My child started a new sport. And meanwhile, I'm sitting there mentally thinking about the speech therapy my son is in and the sensory challenges that he has and how my number one goal is to support him in being emotionally regulated and what his school accommodations are. Like those are the milestones that I'm focusing on. And I remember feeling this quiet panic raising in my chest, right? Like somehow my child's worth was being measured against a developmental scorecard that was designed by, anyway, I'm not going there. And let me tell you something, comparison will rob you of joy faster than almost anything else in parenting, right? Comparison is the worst thing that you can do. There's a section in the Conscious Parenting book that talks about how culture convinces parents that good parenting means producing the quote unquote perfect child. The child who is successful, impressive, high achieving, well behaved, socially acceptable, emotionally easy to navigate. And if we are being honest with ourselves, that pressure becomes amplified in our parenting of our children who are neurodiverse. Because many parents feel like they're not just raising a child, they're managing public perception. And so we feel the pressure to prove that our child is intelligent enough, is capable enough, is independent enough, is successful enough, almost like we're trying to protect them from being underestimated by forcing them to overperform. And we have to be really careful with that. And so I think about this from a place also with my own identity as a Black mother raising a neurodiverse child. That's another layer, right? If you have other identities that oftentimes are marginalized, and you're navigating race and respectability politics and behavior expectations and stereotypes and school discipline disparities and safety concerns, right? Like those are things that add on when you hold other identities as well. And I know this to be true from my own experience and a lot of parents that I engage with, that oftentimes, particularly as Black parents, we feel pressure to make our children appear exceptional, to appear exceptionally compliant, articulate, and emotionally controlled because we know the world is often less forgiving toward our children. And that pressure can quietly become exhausting. I wrote about in my recent Substack post about that quiet burnout and how it shows up in spaces like this. Sometimes we're not even parenting from authenticity anymore. We're parenting from survival. And that's not the goal. Like, I want better for us. So I want to think about this from our discovery, acceptance, and embracing framework. When we choose to ask ourselves, who taught me what success looks like? I mean, seriously ask ourselves that. What defines success? Is it our grades? Is it behavior? Is it achievement? Is it popularity? Is it independence? Is it productivity? And more importantly, ask yourself, does my child actually benefit from those expectations? Or am I trying to soothe my own fear, right? It's layers to this. That's the discovery phase. And then the acceptance means acknowledging this truth. Your child may not follow the timeline society expects, and that is okay. And that does not make them less valuable. That may take time to get to, right? I get that as well. Because acceptance is not, I'm going to stop believing in my child. Acceptance is, I stop forcing my child to become someone else in order to feel worthy, right? And then becomes the embracing. Embracing shows up when we celebrate the child in front of us, not the imaginary child we were taught to expect. And this does not happen overnight. And it's a journey, it's an ongoing decision, but it does change everything. So now success becomes emotional safety, confidence, joy, self awareness, regulation, meaning calmness, connection, and authenticity, not just performance. So, as usual, I cannot leave you all without giving you some ways that you can release the pressure for a perfect neurodiverse child, quote unquote, which sounds ridiculous to say. But here are some ways you can potentially release some of that pressure. Number one, redefine success. Success is not my child looks neurotypical. Success is my child feels safe enough to be themselves, period. Number two, stop treating childhood like competition. Some children walk earlier, some speak late, some regulate differently. Development is not a race. Be careful what you praise. That's going to be number three, and this is one of my favorites. If every compliment is rooted in achievement, children start believing love is conditional. And so praise effort, praise creativity, praise kindness, self-advocacy, resilience. These are so important. Short story. When Khalil and I are getting ready for school in the morning, we have our routine. And so this is the time I use to build his independence as well. And so I'm guiding him through next steps. Okay, go brush your teeth. Okay, now let's go get dressed. Okay, grab your backpack, pack your backpack. And so don't forget, he likes to bring certain toys to school, and I allow for that, as a part of honoring his regulation. And so I'm often telling him to not to forget certain things, and obviously I'm back up for that reason. And so as we're leaving out for the bus, we're forgetting a particular thing, and I have to remind Khalil, don't forget, Nick, to remind me to do this. And so Khalil doesn't always respond as I'm speaking with him, but I know that he's listening because the next day, sure enough, we were about to walk out the house and I was going to forget to have him take a particular thing to school that he needs to take. And he reminded me, like he mentioned it. And I was like, Khalil, I'll be honest with you, I shed a couple of tears, but I was like, very good, because that is advocacy. It's you listening and remembering, and it just made my day. So, anyway, be careful what you praise because effort and advocacy matter too. Next, let your child rest from performance. I talked about in a previous episode that sometimes we can over therapize them. It's okay to take a break from those things. And some neurodiverse children spend all day having to conform and socialize at school and amongst peers. And so when they come home, they can feel exhausted and dysregulated. I'm mindful of that, and I give Khalil space when he comes home after school to kind of be with himself. And though Khalil is not one to truly mask a lot and change his affect around others, but still, there's a lot of conformity that has to happen. And so, giving them space to rest. Home should not feel like another performance review. It should be a safe space for them. And then the last two, 5, stop explaining your child to everyone. I thank God I stopped doing this, but I, naturally would apologize about some of his unsavory or unacceptable social behaviors in public. And, immediately when I would say sorry, I would tell myself, stop saying sorry because he's not doing anything wrong. And at this point in the journey, I don't do that anymore. It's not a part of my vocabulary, but it is something that I need to be aware of, and I encourage other parents to stop apologizing for your child. But also don't feel the need to explain your child. When sometimes people speak to Khalil in public, sometimes he responds, sometimes he doesn't, and I allow for either choice to be made. He can decide. And so some parents are emotionally exhausted because they feel pressure to constantly justify their child's humanity. And you don't owe everybody access to your child's story, and you don't owe anyone an explanation. So there's that. And then lastly, ask yourself, am I preparing my child for life, or am I preparing them for approval? That distinction is so important. I know your intention is to prepare them for life, but sometimes we get stuck in the approval of others that we forget our child's experience. This is one of the biggest things that I unpack in many of the resources that I've designed for parents in our first 90 days guidebook and our transformative parent playbook, where I support parents who are overwhelmed and who are trying to optimize. Because parents often arrive overwhelmed, trying to optimize, correct, manage, compare, and overcompensate. That's a whole nother conversation that I would love to have, the overcompensation piece. But underneath that is usually grief and fear and exhaustion. And so my resources are intended to help you all unpack that. So I want to leave you all with this today. Your child does not need to become extraordinary to deserve dignity, and they do not need to outperform to earn belonging. And some of the most beautiful neurodiverse children I know are not the ones society calls gifted or exceptional. They're the children who finally feel safe enough to unmask and be themselves. And when I say masking, I mean someone who is pretending to be neurotypical or like others instead of being themselves. Safe enough to exhale, safe enough to exist without constantly proving themselves to others is the kind of success that I care about and that's most important. So, as always, thank you for joining me for another episode of Learning Curves and Coffee. And if this conversation was helpful to you, share it with another parent or educator who is perhaps navigating the pressure of supporting neurodiverse children performance in a performance driven world. So, until next time, keep your expectations flexible, as always, and your coffee strong, and your child's humility bigger than society's labels, and your child's humanity bigger than society's labels. And as always, take care of yourself. Bye. Hi, welcome back. Thank you for tuning in per usual. This is Learning Curves and Coffee.